If you were to ask me what the biggest drawback to using hand tools is, but also at the same time the most valuable skill you could ever learn, I'd have to say it's sharpening. I mean, think about it. You have to know how to sharpen saws, chisels, spindle gouges. Oh, this blue film is actually a protective coating I put on my gouges to make sure they don't rust. Marking gauges, plane irons, knives. I tell you, you have to know how to do everything. And out of these, the most difficult thing to sharpen has to be your complex molding irons. Ta-da! Just because of that shape. It's so complicated, there's so many different shapes and angles in here that it's just a pain to do. So, I had a comment a couple of weeks ago about how I sharpen these irons, and I want to show you how I do that today. So the first and easiest method for sharpening these complex molding irons is to first use the iron to cut a molding. Then you take some stropping compound, you rub it all over the contours of the molding, and then you take your iron and you place it on the molding and you strop it over and over again. And this will effectively strop or sharpen all the different contours of the iron at once. Then what you do is you take it over to your sharpening stone and you just clean up the back. As most of you know, I have a very small shop, so I have to kind of hide things away. But one of the things that I don't want to hide away, because I use it very often, is my sharpening station. So what I've done is I attached some slide rails to my sharpening station so that I can fit underneath the desk, and then I just take a very large cement nail, if you want to call it that, put it in the top, push that down to secure it so it doesn't move, and I'm good to go. So let's zoom in here a little bit. Sharpening the back, same way you do with everything. Put some. This is actually a combination of water and cleaning liquid that I mixed together myself to help get rid of the debris as I'm sharpening. Place it flat, 2 fingers on there, move back a couple times. This is the coarsest stone. Obviously I would go coarse, medium coarse, fine if I was doing this for real, but this is just an example, okay? So you got that, clean that up on the back, and if you feel, you can't feel, I'll feel for you, it's very sharp. So that's the easiest way to do this. Now I already know what you're going to say. How do I make a molding if the iron is too dull to make the molding? It's kind of like a chicken and egg situation. So I'm going to show you how to sharpen these if they are dull to begin with and you can't actually cut a molding. So the first thing you have to do is go back to the sharpening stones and polish the back like I just showed you. So after you've polished up the back of your iron, if you've done it correctly and everything is flat, you'll find that on the opposite side, a burr has been created along these curved sections. So we have to remove that burr to completely sharpen the iron. So we're going to take a multi-stepped approach. The first area we're going to hit is this curved section that forms the bead. So you want to get yourself a piece of metal rod or wooden dowel that is approximately the same diameter as the bead. Okay. Now this is much smaller, but what we're going to do is take some sandpaper and wrap that around and then put it in the vise here and tighten it down so that just the rod is peeking out from the top, okay? And now this has increased the diameter slightly. It's not exactly the same diameter as this, but it's good enough. Then you're going to want to hold this at 35 degrees, which is the angle of these irons, or at least it should be. Let's take our gauge here. We have, where's 45? 45 is right there. So let's see, what do we got here? Nope, that doesn't hit. Oh, let's go this way. Okay, so that's 35 degrees. So we know this is a 35-degree angle. Now, you can obviously just look at it from the side to make sure that this part of the iron, the edge of the iron, is parallel with the vise, and then stroke it back. Since the rod is not the exact same diameter as the bead, you're going to want to stroke it a little bit side to side as you stroke it back, just so that you get both sides of this curve. And if you can get something in there to feel it, it's kind of hard because my finger is kind of big, you'll feel that the burr has been taken off and the curved section is now sharp. Now, let's do the outside curve. How do we do that? Well, there are two ways. So I have two approaches to this. The first approach is to treat this iron as if I were sharpening a knife. For example, if I was going to sharpen this hunting knife, because of the curve on the front, I want to get that as well as the straight part. The way I would sharpen it, or the way I do sharpen it, is I put the tip on the stone, and then I have my fingers over the top, and then I push as I rotate the blade underneath, and then bring it back. This type of motion. And I repeat that several times, all the time keeping the knife at the appropriate angle, and then I switch to the other side. This Stanley 55 iron is a curve as well, okay? So you're going to take the same approach. Put the curve down. Now, I'm talking about just this part here. We're not going to worry about this part right now. Just this part on the inside of the bead. We're going to put this down on the stone. Make sure we have the correct angle. You do that by adjusting, lifting the blade up and down till you can feel it. You'll be able to feel where that angle is. And then you want to put your fingers down on it and then stroke it as you move it forward and back. Now, I will warn you, this is a little precarious, and it's kind of difficult to keep the iron at the correct angle, okay? Which is why I opt for a second option when I'm sharpening these, which is to use a separate small stone, okay? And what I do, if I use the small stone, it's much easier for me to be able to look from above and check that that angle is maintaining contact with the stone at all times. And then what I do is I use a circular motion, and I move the iron rather, as I go and make circles with the stone. All the time keeping that angle, looking from above and keeping that angle correct. It takes a little bit to get used to, but once you do get used to it, I find that this is more consistent than using the stone. You can see it's a little bit sharpened already there. And it's starting to feel pretty good. Now, this part is a lot easier. The outside of the bead, again, you want to take the stone, keep it in contact, and just go back and forth over it. This is a lot easier than the curved section. Clean that up, and your iron is good and sharp and ready for cutting. So another weapon I have in my sharpening arsenal is this sharpening plate. It has a concave portion and also an opposite convex portion. And the idea is that you should be able to hit every angle or every shape iron on this one thing. But what I found is it's kind of useless, because when you're sharpening something, you need a pretty good amount of space, well, a little bit anyway, to go back and forth so that you can sharpen it. But with this, the degree to which this angle opens up is so abrupt that really this only fits at one place on the sharpening stone. There's no place to push it. You can't push it because it's too large going up, and there's just not enough going down to hit the whole angle anyway. The same thing goes for the concave portion. It really only fits one place. Now this might be really good for sharpening, for example, lathe tools, spindle gouges, or even carving chisels. But for my lathe tools, I use a specialized jig that attaches to my grindstone for that, and the carving chisels, excuse me, I just do freehand anyway. So I really haven't had much use for this. If someone out there has a good way to use this, please tell me in the comment section. I would love to know. Now I have two last tips that you might find useful, especially for someone who has just started out sharpening and isn't really comfortable maintaining angles and stuff. What you can do is take a block of wood. I told you earlier that the angles of the irons are 35 degrees, at least the Stanley 55 irons are. So get your angle gauge, set it to 35 degrees, mark a line, and then get a handsaw and cut that angle. And then what you can do is you take your iron and you place it on top, face down rather, the same way that you would put it in the plane. Okay, have that on there, hold this, and then take your rod and sandpaper that you had before, hold it against the block of wood, make sure that the blade is peeking out just enough so that it touches the sandpaper, like so, and then just go back and forth. Okay, and that'll keep the angle perfect as you're sharpening up that inner bead section. You can even go back and forth like this. The second tip, if you're having difficulty finding pieces of steel or wooden dowels that are the same diameter as the bead section of these irons, one thing that I have found in the past is if you can find some sort of extendable pointer, like this is a flashlight, but it has an extendable, like a car antenna, if you're old enough to remember cars with antennas like this. Actually, a car antenna might be pretty good because it's a lot thinner than this is. But this is just an example. If you find something that has extendable sections like this, you have lots of different diameter rods in one piece, and they all give you a pretty good length to sharpen your blades with. So this is a real game changer if you can find something with small enough diameter. Now I should mention that everything I showed you today was pretty much freehand sharpening. There are also jigs on the market. For years I used this Veritas jig. I have two of them to sharpen my chisels. But honestly, there are a lot of drawbacks to these jigs that you will learn as you use them. So if you're someone that's new to sharpening, who's never done it before, I recommend getting a jig so that you don't mess up your chisels, especially if you're buying high quality chisels. You don't want to damage them. And then once you get used to sharpening and you learn the basics of it, try to switch to freehand sharpening because it's a lot easier, it's a lot faster, and like I said, there are certain drawbacks to these that I'm not going to go into in this video that kind of limit what you can do with sharpening. So I hope that was useful for somebody out there, and thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.